Would I be an asshole if I didn't want to buy a car with my boyfriend? We are both mid-20s, been together around a year and a half, living together. We both graduated last year. We both work, with my wage around 25 higher than his. However, I've had some expenses this year regarding health and some other genuinely necessary spendings which left me with spending more, and after I pay that part of money every month, we're left with around the same amount of money every month. And it will be so by the end of the year at least. We generally split everything 50-50. After paying for rent, groceries and life in general, we don't really have much to save by the end of the month. We aren't spending irresponsibly or anything. But we're both fresh from uni and our wages are low. Anyways, he mentioned that he'd like us to buy a car, used one, by the end of the year. We both have some saving. With me having around 3x of what he has. I have most of those savings since before our relationship. Since I worked part-time during uni. It's not a huge amount of money. But it makes me feel safe. And it's at least a tiny step towards buying apartment someday. He can't afford a car by himself. If we did buy a car, we'd have to spend all of his savings and at least 2-3 of my savings. Now personally, I have no desire to own a car. Even if I could afford it with no financial worries. I wouldn't buy one right now because I simply don't want it. Objectively, we don't really need it. We require around the same amount of time to get to work by public transport or by car. Except with public transport we don't have to spend on gas and car upkeep. If we did use it to get to work, we don't have the same work hours, so we couldn't go together. Which would mean either we'd take turns, or morely likely he'd be the only one using it, since I hate driving, especially during the rush hour. Public transport is also a good option if we go on dates etc., because parking is expensive and difficult to find. Pro would be that we could organize short weekend getaways more easily, and shopping for groceries would be easier. However, without current lifestyle regarding groceries and cooking, we really only need one larger trip to the grocery store, which is 10 minutes by foot away from our place once every 2 weeks. So generally I don't see a lot of improvement we'd get with a car in our day-to-day life. But it would dry out our saving a lot. And I really resent the idea of spending the money I worked really hard for even before our relationship on something that I really don't want. Do you think it's reasonable of me to say no to this request? Everything after "I don't want this" was unnecessary. You don't want it. Don't do it. If he wants a car so much, he can go ahead and get one. You aren't responsible for bankrolling his material desires. Homeboy wants you to help buy his car is the reality. Personally, I'd never go 50-50 on a car or house or anything like that unless I was married to said person. Joint ownership when you're dating is just asking for problems. Not the asshole you don't really need it and it will just add to your living costs without big improvements to your everyday life. And on top you are losing a lot of your savings. Let's be honest, your BF would profit from it while you are shouldering most of the costs. I wouldn't do it. Don't buy the car. Since he wants the car and he's the one who would probably be driving it most of the time. Let him save up enough money and use his own money to buy the car. Don't spend most of your hard-earned saved money for something you don't want and aren't going to use. Now personally I have no desire to own a car. We require around the same amount of time to get to work by public transport or by car. Except with public transport we don't have to spend on gas and car upkeep. I don't own a car anymore and have good public transport options nearby. Much cheaper life. It's a totally legit choice. No major purchases together unless married. House, car, etc. What happens if you break up and you have paid for 75 of it and he feels entitled since it was his idea to get it? Yes. You can absolutely say no. I'm always interested to know about these 50-50 type scenarios. How do these couples split the pregnancies and childbirth? In case they decide they want children. Seems like it turns into a 70-30 relationship. What happens to the car if you break up? You are so young. Do not start a pattern of making significant financial decisions you don't want just to satisfy someone else. He's an adult. If he wants a car, he can get one. Now, personally, I have no desire to own a car. Don't buy a car. In your 20s, a year and a half is nothing. I recommend you maintain your financial independence. Nope, please don't do it. Too many things could go wrong. He could stop making payments while continuing to drive it and you're stuck. He could break up with you and leave you with the car. Please do not set yourself on fire to keep him warm. I wouldn't recommend it. I bought a car with my ex and then we broke up and it caused a lot of drama after. I also didn't want to buy a car as new and fancy. Was happier with something older, smaller, etc. But he pushed then after we broke up, who got stuck with the payments. Remember that a car's expenses aren't just the payments. The gas, the maintenance and emergencies are something to consider too. I'd say it's not the time for you to buy a car and keep saving. Go with your good instincts. If you don't want or need a car, it is not unreasonable to not buy one. If you do end up buying a car, or just as a mention in the discussion, I'd advise getting a contract that specify that the part that keeps the car in the case of a breakup has to repay the other part's expenses in buying it. It is reasonable to say no. You say don't want it. You are not married and shouldn't mix finances. Get loans. Or buy real estate together. Those are simple financial mistakes. If he doesn't have money to purchase a car for himself, he simply needs to save until he can do it himself. When he does, it's his car and his responsibility. Also true of you should you change your mind. The only wrinkle there is that auto insurance may require both of you to be listed on the policy as operators if you are living together. Don't do it. If you break up, you'll regret it. He's your boyfriend, not your husband. Do not buy something that expensive with someone you are not married to. Laws are murky for joint ownership of property when you're just dating, and you could end up paying for this for a long time even if you break up. Not to be all our fuck cars, but if I didn't live in a place where it's necessary to have a car to get around, I wouldn't buy one. You're lucky to have a setup where a car is more of a nice to have item than a necessity. Used cars, in particular, can be real money drains. Consider the gas, parking fees, regular maintenance, and eventually paying for bigger repairs and issues. Protect your savings. You're not. And do you really want to put money into something you don't want? And what would happen if you break up? Who gets the car? If he wants one, he can pony up for it. I personally wouldn't invest in it.